Phoenix Lady here. Welcome to the first of a series of video logs about my road trips around Montana. I've been a fan of the roadside geology books published by Mountain Press in Missoula, Montana since the beginning, back in the 70s. I now have all of them and buy a new one as soon as it comes out on Amazon. There's one for each of the western states, plus at least 2/3 of the rest of the states. I also have most of the geology underfoot books, which go into more detail about specific locations within a state. I have been waiting for a decade or two for Mountain Press to come out with the second edition of the Roadside Geology of Montana. It came out earlier this year and I glommed onto it. As you can see, it's already getting a bit worn. You may have already seen my short video of our trek over the Beartooth Pass. That was an experiment to see if I could even do such a thing. I hope to improve on it soon with more video from Yellowstone, a different trip, and possibly other areas of the state. My focus on these road trips is more to showcase the beauty of the landforms and rocks and share what has been learned about how they came to be, so you won't see a lot of people. All trips begin at home. This is a quick look at mine in Manhattan, Montana. The town lies in the northwestern portion of the Gallatin Valley. Bozeman is about 20 miles away on the eastern side of the valley. It could be said the valley is a big hole in the ground filled with millions of years of sediments dating back to the Eocene. But underneath all that dirt, there are faults. One must run right under the town because every so often we experience the rumble and shaking of earthquakes between magnitudes 2 and 4. This shouldn't be surprising since we're only about 5 miles east of Logan, where, according to Roadside Geology Montana, I-90 cuts across the southern tip of the Horseshoe Hills, which consist of Proterozoic, Paleozoic, and Mesozoic rocks that were folded and thrusted during the Sevier orogeny. Most of what you see across the Gallatin River at Logan, Montana is Cambrian to Permian, all of the Paleozoic era rock, 250 to 500 plus million years old. Imagine all the stresses and strains it must have gone through to be so contorted now. After waiting for the trains to finish their dance in Logan, we moved on to the Missouri Headwaters State Park, where the Madison and Jefferson rivers join and the Gallatin flows in another mile or so to the north. In this long clip, we'll start at the north end of the park, just below the Gallatin confluence. I couldn't get any video of the actual confluence because of the trees and brush around it. At Ling Rock, I walked down to the river just above where the Gallatin joins it. Here I learned about a ferry that used to cross here, and the little town of Gallatin City, rather pretentious, don't you think, that used to exist across the river. While the river is high now, it isn't suitable for steamboats. That doesn't keep people from rafting and kayaking all the time. We didn't see any here, but we saw plenty all the way up into the Big Hole, 100 miles upstream. Here we have the confluence of the Madison River, which heads in Yellowstone National Park, and the Jefferson, which drains most of southeastern Montana west of the Madison Valley. More about all that later. From here, we hopped onto I-90 for a short jaunt over to US 287. At this elevation, we could see across the Gallatin Valley, with the valleys of the Madison and Jefferson in the foreground. More or less in order, you can see the Bridger Range, the Gallatin Range, and the Madison Range. The Tobacco Root Range is hidden by an assortment of rumpled hills. We drove south on US 287 to follow the Jefferson River to the Montana 2 exit or turnoff to Lewis and Clark Caverns. In some places, the road is squeezed in between the river and bluffs of Cambrian shale and limestone. On Montana 2, near Sappington Gap, where the Jefferson River flows through the London Hills, we stopped for first lunch at the Lewis and Clark Caverns. No, we didn't go through the caverns. Been there, done that, long ago, almost 50 years ago with my husband before we got married. Not going to do it again. But if you ever come to Montana, the caverns are worth checking out. North of the cavern, or the canyon, is the Jefferson River Canyon Fault, which is at least 1.4 billion years old and marks the rise of Archean rocks to the south, the Dillon Block, as the Belt Basin dropped. Not that you can actually see any of these really ancient rocks here. The caverns developed during the last ice age, and maybe the one before it, in Mississippi and Madison Group limestones. Or maybe long before, since they're now 1,300 feet above the river, which is why I don't want to climb through them again. According to Roadside Geology Montana, this clip shows the dark gray conglomerate of the La Hood Formation. Maybe I didn't get close enough to catch the round cobbles and pebbles ranging from an inch to a foot across, composed of gneiss, schist, and streaky metamorphosed granite from very deep in the crust 1.4 billion years ago. But maybe that's what those slanting slabs of rock across the river contain. Either way, we're looking at really old rock. Still, these rocks are only half as old as the 3 billion plus year old rocks along the Madison River, not all that far south of Manhattan. I'll show you those rocks another day. At La Hood, we've come out of the canyon. On looking north across I-90, we can see the Golden Sunlight Mine. The gold mine first started in 1892, but not seriously worked until 1983. According to Roadside Geology Montana, the gold is finely disseminated both in strongly shattered sedimentary rock of the Proterozoic La Hood Formation and in the late Cretaceous volcanic dikes intruding it. More than 3 million ounces of gold have been recovered since 1983 using cyanide heap leaching. The mine was slated to close last year, but whether it has, I don't know. There's a better picture of it in the book. From Cardwell, we drove west on I-90 to Butte through Homestake Pass. Since I was driving and there were no good places to stop, I don't have any video for this stretch until later on the way home. So be patient. This stretch is worth the wait. West of Butte, we headed south on I-15 toward Dillon, Montana. I lived there from 69 to 72 and again from 84 to 88. But we're not going there today, so that area is a tale for another time. Here we have stopped to take a look around Divide Valley, where Homestake Pass took us from the east side of the Continental Divide to the west side. This rest stop is about 3 miles south of the Continental Divide as it passes between the northern Pioneer Mountains west of us to the Highland Mountains east of us. We're again on the east side of the Continental Divide. The creek in the valley below flows into the Big Hole River a few miles further on. The Big Hole later joins the Beaverhead and the Ruby Rivers near Twin Bridges to become the Jefferson River, but we'll get video of that on another trip. The snow-covered mountain west of us is Fleecer Ridge, a raised block of early Cretaceous Kootenai Formation, baked hard by two more recent plutons on either side. The Highland Mountains east of us are mostly rocks of the boulder batholith, more than 60 miles long north to south and 40 to 50 miles wide east to west. Boulder itself is well north of Butte on I-15. A few miles down the road, we turned off on State Highway 43. We were hoping to check out Humbug Spires at the south end of the Highland Mountains, but time was getting away from us, so we headed west. Here at Divide Bridge, just a little west of the village of Divide, we can see that the Big Hole is still running full. This was filmed on July 2nd, so the spring runoff is moving well into summer. We can also see that intrepid souls are about to float downstream and enjoy the warm day and bright sun. From here, we drove around to Wisdom by way of the Big Hole River Canyon through the Pioneer Mountains and into the Big Hole. This is a really big hole filled with almost 3 miles worth of sediments since Eocene times. We ate second lunch at the battlefield. Here the band of Nez Perce, fleeing to Canada under Chief Joseph to avoid being forced into a reservation, were attacked by the U.S. Army in 1877. After losing 90 of their people, the Nez Perce Braves used the geology to trap the soldiers on a hillside of conglomerate and sandstone above the camp, while the women and children buried the dead and escaped. Just a side note, in these contentious times when the woke demand the erasure of history because those of Caucasian ancestry, including me, are evil and should be destroyed and forgotten. Sorry, no one can travel back in time to change the choices made in the past. What happened at this battlefield is inexcusable. A lot of things done throughout history by those demanding power over others, no matter what color of brown, the color of skin, are inexcusable. All the more reason to remember those things and learn how to avoid repeating them. As George Santayana and many others have said in some form or other, those who forget or refuse to learn history are doomed to repeat it. Any study of history, including geology, shows that while history may not repeat itself exactly, it does rhyme. And now, back to our story. The grassy hillsides here are on the upthrown side of the fault, raising the Anaconda Pintler Range to the west, composed of late Cretaceous and Eocene granitic rocks above the deepening Big Hole. We soon crossed the fault and headed up the creek to Chief Joseph Pass on the Continental Divide, then down a couple of miles to Lost Trail Pass, also on the Continental Divide. Meanwhile, just before we did this, as we passed out of the Big Hole battlefield, I took a shot looking south to the tall Beaverhead Mountains. More about them later. All along the western side of US 93 at the pass is the Lost Trail Ski Resort. So the grassy chutes you see here and there are snowy ski trails and avalanche chutes in the winter. We drove a few miles north on US 93 to try to get video of the north side of the pass, then drove back up to it and down the other side into Idaho a few more miles. North of the pass, the rocks are mostly tertiary volcanic and granitic rocks, visible mainly in the road cuts. South of the pass, some of the rocks in the road cuts may be middle Proterozoic belt rocks. We couldn't get any video over Chief Joseph Pass because of the trees, grown back from the last time my brother visited the area decades ago. From here, my brother drove, so I was able to shoot video as we drove, which is why most of the remainder of the clips suffer from assorted issues, from jerkiness to bugs splattered on the windshield. By this time, it was nearly 5 p.m., and we were a long ways from home. As we drove east past the battlefield monument, I tried again to capture the snow-covered Beaverhead Range. You saw it at the end of the battlefield clip. They are mostly middle and lower belt supergroup rocks from the Proterozoic area, well over 1 billion years old. Somewhere in them is a much younger, like Little Ice Age between 1300 and 1870 AD, rock glacier. There's a picture in the book under State Highway 278. We couldn't see it at our distance. Just outside Wisdom, we stopped long enough to get this view of the mountains in the Anaconda-Pintler Wilderness. As nearly as I can make out, the prominent pair of peaks is West Ghost Peak on the left, over 10,000 feet high, and Long's Peak on the east, not quite as high. From this angle, they appear to be glacial horns connected with an arete or narrow ridge. Boy, did that change later when we passed them. Other peaks in the area may be Warren Peak and Queener Peak. The higher peaks appear from the maps in Roadside Geology, Montana for Highway 43, to be belt supergroup rocks sitting on top of tertiary granite. This is because the ancient rock was shoved eastward over the younger rock on the Grasshopper Plate during the Sevier orogeny in the Cretaceous. Read the book for more info about this mountain building event.
I don't know what it is.
I don't think it covered all the mountains. I don't think we'd have been able to get them all.
From Wisdom, we headed north toward those mountains, then east around the Western Pioneers as we followed the Big Hole River into its canyon, eventually. We saw quite a few raptors on this stretch of river, but didn't get any in the video. The pioneers here are mostly tertiary granitic intrusions beneath the trees. Before we reached Rise River, we turned north on State Highway 569, a shortcut to Anaconda, Montana 1, and I-90. Well, actually, it was considerably shorter than retracing our steps over to I-15. Here we crossed the Continental Divide again as we passed between the high Anaconda-Pintler Range and the backside of Fleecer Ridge and the Plutons mentioned earlier. Once we got close to Anaconda, we could actually see the top of the Anaconda smelter stack between a pair of hills that lay between us and the town. Unfortunately, I didn't get video of that.
The Sapphire Range, I think.
We stopped at the Anaconda I-90 rest stop for a stretch. So did a lot of other people. In this clip, the snow-covered mountains to the north are the Flint Creek Range, while those to the south are the Anaconda Pintlers. You can see the Anaconda smelter stack, all that's left of the smelter complex, in the middle. Like the Anaconda Pintlers, the Flint Creek Range includes rocks from Proterozoic belt rocks through Paleozoic and Mesozoic sedimentary rock, all folded and thrust faulted as if they'd been scraped into a pile by a huge bulldozer. That isn't exactly what happened. It's more a case of the severe orogeny, when large terrains well past west of Montana moved in on the Farallon Plate, then subducting under western Idaho, and docked, creating the fender bender to end all fender benders. Again, read the Roadside Geology Montana book, and then read Roadside Geology of Idaho, Roadside Geology of Washington, 2nd edition, and Roadside Geology of Oregon, 2nd edition, for more info. Here we are on I-90 west of Butte, heading toward the richest hill on Earth. The reddish rocks topping the cliff hills to the north and south are Lowland Creek volcanics, about 25 million years younger than the Boulder batholith. To the south, at the Ramsey exit, is a huge phosphate processing plant, although all you can see is a pile of phosphate rock. The area was closed in '98 as a waste site, but is scheduled to open again in 2020. As we approached Butte itself, my brother pointed out this white blob up on the tall ridge above Butte. This is the Lady of the Rockies, new since last time I visited Butte back in the '80s. She appears in between each of the next few segments. To the north is Montana Tech, the Bureau of Mines, and the World Museum of Mining, followed by a view of the upper edge of the infamous Berkeley Pit, from which have come untold quantities of copper sweetened by a fair amount of silver and gold, and more recently molybdenum, as well as serious pollution problems. Still, Butte isn't called the richest hill on Earth for nothing. It's actually a little smoother, but well, the top of the pit can see the granite of the boulder batholith as we head up toward Homestake Pass. To the south, we can see the Highland Mountains, the highest of which still have snow at the beginning of July. Driving through Homestake Pass with all the semis chugging away to climb the steep grade, averaging 6 to 7% on each side, then try to stay under 25 miles per hour on the downside is scary in either direction. I drove it west, but my brother drove it east so I could get video of the granite boulders weathering in place. Granite weathering is fascinating, and pretty much every roadside geology dealing with a western state explains it at one time or another, so I won't do it here. At this point, we cross the Continental Divide again to return to the Missouri River Basin. Enjoy all the rocks. As the pass opened up heading east, we could see all the way over to the entrance to the Jefferson River Canyon.
Belt Mountains or Little Belt Mountains or something.
Probably Bridgers. They do have a direction thing on the GPS.
this point? I don't think so.
Well, from now on, it's probably not as windy. A bit windy there for 75 earlier. In fact, I think the speed limit in that part was 65, which...
A little later in this clip, I looked south up the Jefferson River Valley. From the elevation at which I was recording, I could actually see the end of the Ruby Range poking out behind the nearer Tobacco Root Range, almost 40 miles away beyond Twin Bridges. As we approached Whitehall, to the left of the highway, the flat greenish slope is actually the tailings pile forming the back of the Golden Sunlight mine. To the right, you can see the Tobacco Root Mountains. To the left are the hills made up of the La Hood conglomerate. In between, in the distance, the snow-capped mountains may be the northern end of the Madison Range. I'm guessing because the only reason I even noticed the gap south of Cardwell is that on our previous road trip to this area, we missed the turnoff to the Jefferson River Canyon. We drove through Cardwell and then through the valley of the South Boulder River and hit US 287 as it came down towards Sappington Gap after passing over Norris Hill. I could be wrong, and those could be the Gravelly Range, which are a kind of extension of the Tobacco Roots south. I don't remember them being high enough for snow this late in the year. Here at Cardwell, we again see the entrance to the Jefferson River Canyon. This time, however, we're going to climb laboriously over Cardwell Hill. The elevation just exceeds a mile at the top. Funny fact, in Colorado, where I spent over 30 years, there are 53 mountain peaks over 14,000 feet high. From Long's Peak west of Greeley, where I lived for 6 years, to Mount Evans west of Denver. You can drive to the top of that. To Pikes Peak just west of Colorado Springs. I've been to the top of Pikes Peak 3 times over the years by cog rail. True, but you can also drive up. They have a gift store and restaurant on top, and I could see my house down in Colorado Springs. They even do fireworks from the top of the mountain to celebrate the new year. I show a video of that on my YouTube channel. Colorado Springs itself is over 1,000 feet higher than the pass at Cardwell Hill. The tallest mountain in Montana is somewhere around 12,800 feet high, and you can't drive to the top of it as a tourist because it's in the middle of the Beartooth Plateau. Sure, elevationism is bad, but still, moving to Montana from Colorado Springs last year was, to put it mildly, a bit of a come down. Oh well. According to Roadside Geology Montana, the prominent light-colored cliffs in Doherty Mountain to the north are Cambrian limestone formations wrapped around tight folds formed by severe thin-skinned compression. Occasional greenish stripes in the road cuts are deeply weathered cells of andesite sandwiched between the sedimentary layers. South of I-90, the rocks are of the Proterozoic La Hood Formation we've seen before. Once we got past Cardwell Hill, which was at least as scary as Homestake Pass due to the tight curves and the groaning trucks, we rode down the Tertiary Renova Formation to Three Forks. At the Gallatin River Bridge, the elevation was exactly 4,200 feet, so the drop from the top of Cardwell Hill, just under 5,300 feet, was about 1,100 feet. My brother found this interesting for reasons I'm not clear about, but that's probably because he's been a Montanan longer than I was a Coloradan. From here, we can see the Little Belt Mountains, the Bridger Range, the Gallatin Range, and eventually the Madison Range, all serving as the rim of our little hole, aka the Gallatin Valley. As we cross the Madison River, south of here is the Madison Buffalo Jump, one of many around western Montana where pre-native pre-Columbian Native Americans stampeded buffalo over the cliffs as the only relatively safe way they could hunt these large and dangerous creatures. I've been to this park, but given the height of the Eocene pebbly conglomerate cliff, I decided not to try to take the path to the top. The white rock in the bluff here is probably continuous with the cliff in the park.
And that's the Madison River.
Here is a different view of where the Gallatin River chewed through the southern end of the Horseshoe Hills we looked at in the beginning of this trek. Ah, home sweet home. Tiny but growing Manhattan, Montana. I hope you've enjoyed this trek around southwestern Montana. See you next time. Phoenix Lady out.